Hello and welcome back to another episode of Calming Troubled Waters by the Samaritan movement. In today's episode, we discussed parenting through uncertainty. So my name is Tristan Gullah, Program Coordinator at the Family Life Commission, and we have a very dense conversation here that we'd like to bring towards you, the viewers. In the last episode, we would have had a discussion about youth, and this time we would like to have a conversation about parenting within the current climate and just kind of understanding where we can go as a family, understanding where we can go as a community, and coming together to overcome these uncertainty. So today I'm joined with a very esteemed panel, so I'd like to introduce them. So we start on my right.
Sandy Benguche.
I'm
Sandy Benguche.
Yes, I am Sandy Benguche's husband, Deacon Hillary Benguche.
Right, on my left.
Yes, I am Shirley Tappet.
And I'm Kevin Morin.
Awesome. So in the last episode, the host would have used an analogy to kind of describe the conversation, in that he described it as he compared it to Maracas Bay or Maracas Beach. So he said that the conversation will start off in the shallow and it goes off into the deep. But I think this conversation takes a bit of a reverse. So it starts off in the deep, and we're kind of using this conversation to guide parents, guide families to the shallow, guide them through that uncertainty, guide them through that unknowingness, and guide them to safety, right? So we start off with the first question, just kind of, what are you seeing? What are you hearing when you look around your society, when you look around the communities, when you look around the international scene? What are you seeing when it comes to the geopolitical realities? And how is that influencing your parenting style? How is that influencing how you interact with your child or your children?
Well, I can go. We are fortunate to have young adult children. And our first set of grandchildren, I would call it, they're 20 and 18, late teens.
Nice.
And the next set of grandchildren are toddlers, 5 and 3. And for each age group, you find that they are engaging the situation differently. I have very, very challenging discussions with all three, but when you speak about the geopolitical system and what's going on, it's mainly my young adult children that challenge me very much. We have a wide spectrum of views, and depending upon media and different ones and different perspectives. So it's always to be able, what I have found is not to choose too many sides, because it's so easy in this time. You know, just the other day, sometime they were looking at a video, and the announcer on the video kept speaking about leftists and rightists. And one has to be, as a parent, to make sure that you occupy a parent-central position and don't get preoccupied, because if you get too much on one side, you find you can alienate yourself from another child. Mm-hmm. So it is to remain in that space where you listen and you are aware of what they're saying, and you try to present a knowledgeable, informed, and family-centric view. And that is very much, I find, very much challenging at times, especially when a lot of communication now takes place on media.
By the technology.
Yes.
Because I think added to that is about, just as you were saying, to expand a little bit, meeting each child where they are.
Yes.
Whether it's based on the age, the school they go to, the friends they have. So for instance, in terms of the issue of the geopolitics, my son tends to be the one. I have two children, one 18, one 16. And he tends to be the one to be more curious versus the girl as to what actually taken place in terms recently with Venezuela and Maduro. Mm-hmm. Why? Because he's a bit more on social media, and his feed will bring up a lot of those things. So a lot of the conversation is around that. And you're absolutely right. It's not about taking one side versus the other, because it means that you're now shaping a young mind, even when he goes out there and interacts with his friends, because remember, they would take what they learn from home and take back to their friends.
Amongst one another.
That's right. And even on a flip side, one day he came and he asked me, Daddy, who do you prefer, Messi or Ronaldo? And I was like, well, so I had to stop a moment and think, like, oh boy, these are trick questions. Like, you know what? Then he was like, just be honest. Your son just asking you a question. I was like, well, Ronaldo? Then he's like, you're really my father. So we sat there for a good 10, 15 minutes and using statistics to justify why. So it's not just, I was telling them, it's not just about taking what someone else would have said. You have to form your own opinion. I need to take facts, not opinion. Be very careful what you see on social media. You still have to go and look for the facts. Find the good sources for your information to shape your opinion. Don't just take what your father would say or social media, but you shape your own thinking, your own. I think that's one of the most important things for me as a parent. Sometimes when we communicate, I always remind myself I'm shaping a mind here. I'm not perfect at it. We would have made a lot of mistakes over the years.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for having us on the program. I mean, we span so many generations. I would just like to add, you talked about us starting from the deep sea and coming to the shore. I would like to present another image of that, because I think really, we're trying, the waves are coming, and the waves are coming fast and furious. And what we really have to do is learn to surf the waves, because we can't stop the waves. They're coming, and they're there, and they're coming. And they're going to keep coming, and we have to learn to ride the waves and to surf, So I think that's important. And listening as well to Kevin, I'm thinking it's just so good that they're even having this conversation, because one of the big issues that I have found with the teens and with that teenage group, and both our children, they're post-secondary into university, that kind of age group, and so one of the problems is social wellness. They do not have conversations. They talk, the family chat is going a mile a minute, but the absolute having a conversation, and that aspect of social wellness, where you say something, and while you're talking, I'm thinking through how do I answer you, and I'm looking at your personality, and how can I'm working through, that kind of spiritual intelligence thing. How am I going to answer you? How am I going to say what I want to say without hurting your feelings? All of that, social wellness. And to me, there's a huge gap in the society right now in that age group as well.
Yeah, there is, because I always remind, again, myself, friends, and my children that the easiest way to have any form of miscommunication is via this. It is better to have that one-on-one speak, so I can generally see if what I'm saying is affecting in a positive way or negative way. Sometimes even when we're speaking, he's like, Daddy, this person says something and they feel, how do you know that? These are literally just texts on a device. The only way is to actually ask the person to interact. And I think it's so difficult now for a lot of adults and children to recognize and separate that. Just as you were saying, it's more important to sit and have a conversation. So I agree. It's really nice for us to actually have this particular conversation today.
Well, I would just like to say something, although I'm a grandmother and I don't have any children, that I deal with, but I am from a very large family, so I have siblings who have lots of grandchildren and children and so on. But what I find is that what is very important relative to the stresses and the geopolitical situation now is that the children take triggers from what the parents are discussing. How their tone of the discussion and what they say will influence the children one way or the other. But from my personal experience, I haven't seen that interest in those that I am in contact with. But parents have to be very careful. And I think it is important to take, regardless of what is happening, to take a positive view and to stress with them that God is in charge.
Yeah.
Spirituality is so very important.
Most definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess for me, with regards to my family life, I have a 5-month-old at home. And for me, it's more of a, how do I make sure that it's a bit of a duality, because you want to make sure that they fully engage in the world and they experience the best that life has to offer. But at the same time, it's so frightening. You're like, do not dare lay a hand on my child. I'll get on real bad, you know. You know, so
Welcome to parenting.
yeah. So it's like a real rough reality of, oh, this is what my parents went through. This is what my grandparents went through. Yeah. So it's just like a matter of, I want to make sure that he experiences that love that the world has to offer, but I don't want him to get hurt. So it's a matter of just me trying to be patient with the process, be patient with the realities that he has to face. So what I try to do, I try to make sure that when I come home, the first thing I do, I bathe, grab him. And we go on in the park, we play in, we lime in, you know, make sure that he experiences that love at home. So when he goes out, he knows what is just and what is right for him when it comes to love. But I wanted to address something that you would have spoken on as well, Sandy, with regards to that whole idea of social welfare and just social wellness and social the reality of our social reality, in terms of when it comes to this uncertainty, when it comes to the pressures of this uncertainty, it can take an emotional toll on us. How do we as parents get ourselves in a frame of mind to deal with this uncertainty, to deal with the questions that may come from our children? How do we help them feel safe mentally as well?
Yeah, I think that level of anxiety in the society is high. And the thing about it, depending upon the age of the children, it is amazing how different anxieties affect each one. So like the geopolitics, I find the young adults are very much, that's anxiety. And then the older teens, that whole issue about what am I, who am I, trying to find themselves in the world, trying to find a career, thinking about a career. But it is so, and thinking about artificial intelligence and whether or not, you know, what career path I should take. I have found that from my experience, it is as a parent to ask questions and to encourage questions. And not so much on pronouncement, but to encourage questions from them, but also to ask questions from them and to engage in conversations more than having views or didactic positions. It is, how can we encourage each other to speak, and through very pointed questions, asking questions, you know, what are your friends saying? What are you saying? What career is your friend going into? Because besides geopolitics, artificial intelligence is a big issue of stress as well, and anxiety. So it is to ask age-appropriate questions.
Definitely, thank you, Deacon.
I'm thinking that we're talking about young adults with children like yourself, and I think the parents themselves are going through so much stress themselves. The parents themselves are going through so much that they come home on the evenings, and a lot of them, they go on, it's either YouTube or something, and you're talking to children, to young people now, and they're checking ChatGPT and so to get the response, and so that whole thinking, they're thinking it's okay to be wrong, but let's discuss it, let's debate it, in the classroom, you'd ask something and say, well, this is the response, because they know they're not thinking through answers. They're not, and it's okay to be wrong. Careers are changing right now. Our daughter, she lives in London. She works with the AIs. She works with the bots. You know, she's a linguist by profession, and so her career has totally changed. And you're looking at young people, and their mental state, young parents, they themselves, you know, jobs are changing, you know, people is diminishing so much, and we're talking about Amazon releasing 16,000, but that's not far from our own reality. A lot of our businesses are going into sheds and it's affecting the parents, and they don't have time really to parent. They don't have time to parent themselves, you know, and then sad to say, the youth groups are very few now. The community center is almost non-existent. It's you know, places, social spaces are shutting down. Even the malls no longer, because you go to the malls and so on, they're sitting like this. Young parents, you see them sitting with children and they hand them their phone, and the children are like this, and everybody's like this, and there's no connection. And you know, it's scary as to what is going to happen, because the parents are struggling and themselves, you know, and
I think one of the problems, nobody seems to have time.
Yes.
And it is so important to spend time with your children, you know. And I was talking to my brother today, and he says that in his household, they ban their children from bringing their cell phones and iPads and all that when they're having a meal.
Right.
And they also, when you go into your bed, no phone, no iPad, anything like, because you have it with you, and if you get a call, you will answer your call, you will go on it. So they have these restrictions.
Yes.
But, you know, if you spend time with family, is so very important. You know, time to pray with family, a little bit of time, a few times a week, can have so much dividends.
Yes.
Because you have to listen to the children, you have to listen to them, you have to understand them, you have to respond to them, you have to keep them positive, and you have to include spirituality. Without that, we are dead in the water. We have no hope, you know. So that.
But I think one of the key things mentioned was that, and I'm always reminded of, is that it always starts at the home. Again, we're not perfect, and you know, even as adults, you know, each day is a new day. You know, I always, just like you, first time I became a parent, it was a shock that you can read how many books you want, go to how many seminars you want. The reality is each day is a new day in parenting. But specifically the question, one of these strategies I always believe is that, yes, the communication is very important. No two children are ever the same. And one of the strategies in terms of the quality time always set up is to really find it. So a simple example is that growing up, my mom would have us in the kitchen cooking. Not all families do that. No families, the children are not in the kitchen. The parents still just cook, the children wait, the children come and eat. So just, as an example, just like yesterday, I looked at my son and I said, okay, you're hungry? No problem, come, you're going to cook. Not the first time. And he went through to help. So for him, it was about cooking, but for me, it's that you learned a new skill. Is I move away from the phone. You will move from having strict schedules on when you can and cannot use your phone to now into, I now have to empower you to understand the benefits of putting down your phone. To understand that, okay, you know what, this is not entirely healthy for my eyes, my brain, just before bed. So there are times I recognize in both of them that now, they don't really spend as much time on it as before, because I have now, I always try to empower you to understand the positive and the negatives of everything that you do, especially when it comes to how you interact online, how it affects your emotions. Because one thing I always remind them is that not everything you see online is real. A lot of people take it so personal and adopt it as part of their life. And I think that's the only thing that truly ruins relationships. Continue to break down and chip away at family life. So even with the topic of discussion, calming the troubled waters, just as you would have mentioned, is absolutely correct that we have to figure out our way. How do we surf the waves? How do we recognize the current? You know, and how do you recognize at the end it just remain calm? because I think one of the issues also is that affects the mental aspect of it is that sometimes we choose to give into the stress, the anxiety, as opposed to trusting in God and recognizing this is just a moment and this will pass. And I think we commit too much emotion to the negativity in one certain segment in a moment, you know. And it's just to try and teach, in our case, our children and grandchildren, how do you actually navigate that. But I think is that one of the key principles of that, we have to set that example. Because as I would have mentioned before, it is not beneficial to anyone in the household. If I, as a father, as a husband, I am stressed all the time, that benefits no one. You know, but if my son come and ask daddy, or my daughter come and ask daddy what's wrong, I cannot just simply say nothing. It is now an opportunity to teach you as a young man or a young lady how to regulate and understand that daddy is also human. Yes, you want to see daddy as a superhero, but daddy is also human. And I think that is one of the realities. I think sometimes children, when the reality hits, it is what causes them now not to be able to manage that emotion, that reality. Because remember, you would have seen your parent as a superhero. And then one moment that just shattered, but I'm a human being also. So I think being honest and having honest conversations is also important. So again, you know, when I'm feeling down, as we say in Nietzsche's desolation, I try to have that conversation so he will understand what he may be feeling or what she may be feeling at a point in time and how to navigate that. Yeah, so we are the true examples of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. And I mean, when I look at my realities now as a new father, I'm so grateful for family because, you know, sometimes you get home and you really just, you know he see it and you know he want to play with you and you're just like, just give me 5, let me just get the outside off of me and I'll come and play with you. And he's just like, no, you know, sometimes you want to cook a meal or you just want to have a little time for you and your wife, you know. And just that ability to have family nearby to support you. When they say it takes a village, it really does. It really, really does.
Yeah.
Sometimes...
And you're touching on a really good point there because a lot of people, like, again, if I could talk about our daughter who lives in London with her husband and 2 children. She has no one.
Right.
You know, she has no one. And she works, her husband works, but she works from home. You know, fortunately, she works from home and they have no one.
Right.
And, you know, and that's challenging. That's extremely challenging. How does she navigate her emotions? I mean, my biggest prayer for her is that she be able to balance her motherhood, her career, and her family, her relationship, and, you know, and her home. And it's so, and, you know, the thing is, we have a lot of, we're talking here a lot about ideal families. I have daddy, mommy, baby, but a lot of our families in Trinidad do not have that structure. You know, a lot of it, they have a lot of mothers who go home and they're just there with their children struggling. We have a lot of fathers as well. We have a lot of broken relationships, you know, where the struggle, the children are the last thing on their mind because it's quarrel, it's fighting, it's cussing, is, you know, and you know, and a lot of that is happening within our reality, and you can't, because the external, because outside the world in which we live in, there's that kind of energy happening, and it's in the home as well. You can't, you know, we can't imagine that, you know, you reach home and you know, just clean, well lighted spot, and everything is perfect. Because as you said, the world, you come home, just give me 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes, you know, and it's because you are being mindful, you are, you know, you are aware. A lot of people don't come in with that awareness. They come in from outside and they bring the agitation of the world in, and the children as well.
And they're affected
the children.
by it.
I remember because Hillary used to travel, he used to work outside of Trinidad quite a bit when he was when our children were young, and I stopped working for a while. And one of the biggest benefits, if you ask me, the biggest benefit of not working and picking up my children from school was those couple minutes when I picked them up and they jump in that car before we got home. You felt the kind
That
of day,
moment, yeah.
the day that they had. They talk, you see their mood, you hear about their class. By the time you get home, for parents who have to work and they have to as well, time you get home 6 o'clock in the evening as well, they've already worked out in their mind, okay, they've dealt with the situations at school. Like my little last boy, Nicholas, when he was a little boy, he was extremely naughty in school. And he would come home and sit down in the car and he'd say, Mommy, my teacher was very naughty today. And what it really meant that he got put in the naughty corner, But listening to him, you kind of started
Given
to...
an opportunity,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things I have found, especially with the teenagers are hard to connect with. And so I have become like a fisherman. And I fish with questions. So very often I ask one question and get, ask the next question, ask a third question, and I'm going horizontally with question until somewhere along the line, hopefully I will touch a nerve. And therefore, when I touch a nerve, then is when I engage conversation. But it is very important to try to, especially with teenagers, I have found, the younger ones are more articulate, and the older ones, the young adults, are willing to speak. But teenagers, they speak a lot among themselves, but they are very cautious with the parent-children conversation. And as a parent of teenagers, one has to be constantly pushing and searching and probing and trying to elicit a response, trying to get them engaged, trying to get them to respond to you. Otherwise, they would just keep a lot within. And I think that's one of the real difficult or challenges of the modern world, that it is so easy, especially in the teenage years, for you to go within yourself and you close off and you don't converse.
Definitely. So you just be mindful of time. So we're just going to take a quick break, right? So we just want to thank everyone for watching, for tuning in so far. We'll be back in just a few after these messages. Thank you.
Anxiety is a natural human response to perceived stress, uncertainty, or a threat. It's important to note that everyone experiences it, but not everybody will have an anxiety disorder. Anxiety can be seen as simply an emotion that we feel, which manifests oftentimes physically as a response to excessive worry. It becomes a mental health concern, however, when worry, fear, or tension is persistent, overwhelming, and interferes with daily functioning. Anxiety is not a weakness, lack of faith, or failure to cope. It is the nervous system's response to staying in a prolonged state of alert. Identifying anxiety can be difficult, but also anxiety may present differently from person to person, which is the first thing I believe people need to understand. Common signs include excessive worry, irritability, difficulty relaxing, poor sleep, and avoidance of certain situations. In the Caribbean context, people may complain more about physical discomfort than emotional distress. They may say that they feel pressure, tight, constantly tired, or unable to rest their mind. Anxiety may therefore show up less as nervousness and more of a physical symptom, such as headaches, chest tightness, stomach problems, fatigue, feeling on edge. It's important to understand that anxiety can also affect concentration, relationships, and work performance. From a psychological perspective, anxiety is not a weakness. It is a learned response of the nervous system trying to keep a person safe in a world that often feels unpredictable. What can you do? First, respond with empathy rather than judgment. Avoid labeling the person as weak, lazy, or spiritually flawed. Listen calmly and take their distress seriously, even if you don't fully understand it. For someone experiencing anxiety, offer reassurance without minimizing their experience. Encourage rest, regular routine, and healthy coping strategies. It's often important suggesting professional help when symptoms persist or interfere with daily life functioning. Avoid telling them simply to stop worrying or pray it away, as this is not helpful and it can often increase the shame associated with anxiety. Treatment focuses on helping individuals understand their anxiety, calm their bodies and nervous systems, and shift their relationship with unhelpful thought patterns, and develop coping strategies that fit their cultural values and daily realities.
Hello and welcome back to Calming Troubled Waters by the Samaritan Movement. My name is Tristan Gullop, Program Coordinator at the Family Life Commission, here to continue our conversation on parenting through uncertainty. Today I am joined by Sandy, Deacon Hillary, Shirley, and Kevin as we tackle this topic of parenting through uncertainty. Now, we would have talked a lot about this idea of technology and the impact that it would have had on children within contemporary society. But I wonder if, I guess my question would be, when we see not just technology, but outside influences, so what kind of influences children may have on each other, how do we guard our children from saying, okay, this is the template. So I go to school, this is the behavior that I'm seeing, I'm going to emulate that. How do we prevent that from happening? How do we say at home, this is how you act, and outside of home, this is how you act, this is how you are to behave as well, and this is how this reflects what God's intent is for you.
That's a rough one. Yeah. I think we talk about these schools. Let's just start with the influence of the schools that you talked about. Now, I wage a personal war against these little 10-year-olds running into exams. Okay. And I think so much of the focus and the development of these little ones is you have to pass it. If you don't pass for convent, your life is over. This is the message we're giving them. And that is institutional violence. If you ask me, that's institutional violence. Because they go to school, they're coming home 4:30, Saturday morning, Sunday, homework until 10 o'clock. These little minds, and shaking and shivering because they're not going to pass. I was a teacher at St. Mary's College a couple of years ago, and I honestly used to say Form 1 is a detox year. You teach them to learn to love school again. That's the purpose. Because, they shake these little people. And I think, we can't, parents alone cannot do it. We can't do it. We live in a society. And I think, somewhere along the line, the schools, you go into schools, some schools stop religious knowledge at standard 3 because the children have exams. They cannot release the children because they have exams, and these little babies, and the same thing in secondary schools as well. Where are we placing this religious knowledge and this religion, this kind of development beyond the academic development? And what's the irony of it? A lot of our careers are so changing now that we are teaching them things that will no longer be relevant in the world that they're growing up in anymore. So much of what we are teaching them now, when you look at careers, the careers that they're going into now, it's, we spent a whole lot of money sending Simone to Bordeaux and all over and so to do all kind of stuff. Now she trains the bots. When she told me, I said, what do? You train the bots? What do you mean by you train the bots? But that's a modern job. That's a modern job. And, and even, so much of careers are changing, and are we as a society really looking at the whole development of the child? And yes, as parents, we have a lot to do as well. I could talk for 20 minutes.
That's the passion. That's the passion.
Children
Yeah.
to play together.
Yeah.
You know, they have to understand that it's not all about studies. It's not all about careers and all that. All that is very important, but it's important relationships, communication, having friends. You know, good friends, it is so important. You know, I just came from a little vacation abroad. And, I was talking to I was with my family, with my sister's grandchildren, one 9, one 14, and they were going to the school. And they were telling me that in their school, this was abroad in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi actually, and it is a regular practice that every day the children have half an hour within the school time to do what they want together, to do play games, to do whatever
social
things,
segment, yeah.
their own little
That's their
activities.
time, yeah.
Half an hour during the school too, and they also have a room, a calming room. If children have any problems, they go to this room and they have signs on the board. They say they have to say what it is they are experiencing, and then they discuss it later on. But children, the point is, children have to have some fun, good, clean fun, and enjoy company, enjoy communicating. And not only with their friends, but with their parents.
And that comes back to that point you made earlier, where that we have to create, whether it's in the home, the community, safe groups. So friends like my son, he's an altar server at Holy Cross. And it's one of the very few safe groups, like-minded children of his age, in order for him to interact, to encourage him. But come back to your question, is that I think the greatest challenge is that, again, because each child is an individual. So Tiffany is 18, Michael is 16, girl versus a boy. So the interaction, the experiences are totally different. So as a parent, how do you navigate? I always say to myself that a parent is such a dynamic person, you know, so selfless, because every moment you have to throw yourself away to focus on these two individuals, in my case. And how do you now communicate with them? It's never the same. So for instance, one of the things I'm always worried about, like for me, as a young man growing up in society, I always remind them that it is wrong where we have this misconception that men don't have emotions and should remain bottled up. But for him, I always say, no, you have to learn how to, in a healthy way, express yourself. It's not healthy to keep it bottled up. And I always encourage them to help them identify positive groups and understand why certain groups are not necessarily positive. And you have to make that choice. Because, of course, as we would know, once you reach a certain age, you're not always there as a parent. You have the child now in a situation, at a moment, you are the one to make that particular decision. You know, but they make me proud, because one day he came and he's like, Daddy, I decided not to take this taxi. I was like, why? I just got a feeling not to go. I said, okay, tell me about it. He said, nah, the driver, I was just getting a vibe. I said, I'm not a vibe, you know. People just like to call it a vibe. I said, but that's the Holy Spirit talking inside of you right there. He said, and something just tell me, don't go in that car. I said, okay. He said, Daddy, that is why I'm late. You know, and to encourage them where that, especially him, more he'll come and say, Daddy, yo, I need to tell you something, but don't get vexed. That is always his first line. Don't get vexed. So obviously as a parent, you have to be like, okay, I will not get upset.
Deep breath.
Deep breath. And regardless of what you're saying to me, a deeper breath. You know, you wouldn't get upset. To allow them to encourage them with that, because I think it's very unfortunate, just as you were saying, that they reach a certain age and they closed off.
Yes.
You know, you also have to try, work even harder now to break through that wall, how to get to them. But for me, I think it's a matter of reassurance and trust at the end of the day. You know, they could have that assurance that, listen, this particular adult, because one thing so I always encourage them is that Daddy wouldn't always have all the answers, Mommy wouldn't always have all the answers. But to help to shape them in a particular those values within them, that they could identify other individuals who they could turn to. Yeah. And then I, as a parent now, I could trust now, okay, you made a good decision. And whether knowing or unknown to you, I will now have a conversation with that particular adult. So I think that is so important that at the end of the day, those sort of building blocks, the value system within them, you know, from young, in your case, that is where it really starts. Like one of the things for me, I recognize that goes along after 18 years, something as simple as every day you wake up, give them a hug. Something my son practice every day now. Before he leave the house, when he get up, they come and they give hugs. And that some people see that as insignificant, but it's a big thing, it's a big part of your value system that will help take you outside. So some people will say that they are huggers. I will just sit quietly and say in my mind, yes, they are. But they don't hug every and anybody.
Yeah.
But that is also something, but to instill in them that trust is something, yes, you would earn, but at the same time, you cannot just, as you were saying earlier, that as a teenager now, be closed off to people, be observant, and learn how to discern, as we always say in the faith.
Yeah.
You know, teach them how to have that spirit of discernment. But
sorry,
No,
you were
just
correct.
as you mentioned, hug there. We were at a meeting just recently, and a principal or teacher was telling us that these children are really suffering. They need attention sometimes, right?
Yes.
And one child came up, maybe about 8 or 9, came up to this teacher and just said, "Could you give me a hug?" You know, so that says that the children need to know that they are loved. They
Yeah.
always need to know that they are loved, you know? So look at that, a cry for help, you know?
Yes.
Once
But one of
more.
the things I wanted, you were
Yeah.
talking about influence, and I wanted to bring up the topic of materialism. We live in a world now where materialism is so much at the forefront. And especially with the devices, having cell phones, having tablets, having these things, that the world is communicating a message that you have to have these things. And I want to tell a wonderful story. It made me very proud. One of my young adult children told me the story. He said a friend of his recently came up, and the friend told him, you know, we have to buy a new car because we have to keep up the image, and because the car is getting old, and you know, we always had a new car, and now it's so precious to get this new car. And then the friend turned to him, my son, and said, "Don't you feel that?" He said, "Well, one of the good things is my father and mother always brought us up to know that we had no money."
Yep.
So by knowing that, I didn't have that stress. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't have that preoccupation that I have to keep up. I have to show. I have to demonstrate, because, especially, you know, because I'm a deacon and I have 2 schools to look at. One of the things that the teachers tell me is that a number of parents are going through a lot of financial difficulty, and therefore their children face that disadvantage of not having devices, basic things that others will take for granted, and they will just speak about it in conversation. So it is very important as a parent with a child not to get the children too preoccupied or too focused on materialism, to always be able to tell them. And I feel so proud of my son. I felt so proud of us. I'm so happy we didn't have money. And it is so important for us not to be comparing with the Joneses, for not to be preoccupied with materialism, and to have a value system where materialism, because it is very much so in the world now, and it's especially on the media. On media, everything is materialism. Right? We have to be able to put material things in their correct perspective.
That's beautiful. I'm glad that you said that as well, because I look back at Christmas, and you know, he's 4 months. He would have been 4 months then, and I'm like, what am I going to get this 4-month-old for Christmas? And I was like, I don't think he would appreciate any big exquisite gadgets or anything like that yet. He's a baby, right? So we got him a little ball, and he's fascinated by it. Every time he sees that ball, that's the best gift he could have gotten. And it's just so beautiful, just to you know, you don't necessarily have to bring them up oh, this is the latest gadget, this is the latest accessories, you need to wear this, he's just a baby, you know. And I think once you establish that from early, they come to understanding that that's not important, you know. The values that I want them to have is, oh, you have family around, family is important, we're going out for breakfast, lunch, dinner as a family, I prioritizing that. I ain't going to no party. You know, that's the kind of value I want to bring him up with.
Tristan, I love the glow you fatherhood on your face. But I wanted to talk when you talked about children playing, and so that's how they learn social skills, with each other, and allowing them the freedom of relationships, to work out friendships, and to work out trust, and as you said, instinct, I can trust this one and this one, and learning, and that's learning social skills as well, and that's social wellness as well. Like our little 5-year-old, so the other day she was playing with her 3-year-old sister, and the sister was driving her crazy. She was nagging her, knocking her, doing all kinds of things, and she just stood up and she did this. and she said to herself, emotional moment. And she breathed. And then afterwards I said, well, what was that? What were you doing? She said, at school they said, when you're going to lose it, to get angry, you just stop and you say, emotional moment, and breathe. And so, and she was practicing that. What she was doing is practicing social skills. How do I now deal with, and manage and control my relationships and my emotions with this person? And that's how they're learning social skills. And if it's crazy. And I think it's important for us to, as parents, I don't want to get into that as yet, but listening to you and both of you and Hillary, it's so sad that so many of our children are growing up without a father figure, without that male figure in their lives, and not only the men, but the young men, but the young women as well. Learning what should I admire in a man? What should what does respect from a man look like? And all those different qualities, from men that so many of our children are growing up without that.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And I guess, that leads me to another question that I would like to ask with regards to community. When we look around in our social spaces, our workplaces, church, our communities, what are the support systems that you see existing, and what are the support systems that you would like to see implicated into our society?
Well, Tristan, I want to bring something that is close to you, because Father Hayes, the King, and they have started this mental health initiative. And it is based at Our Lady of Fatima Parish. And I am amazed that it is a very good initiative, because it is adjusted for you to be able to afford it if you need to access the professionals. And every Saturday morning, it's packed. They're packed, and that gives you a sign of how many persons are going through mental health issues. So I believe, judging from Father Hazley's initiative and that mental health program, one of the things that I believe all parishes should have now is a mental health program. It has become extremely, extremely important. And I can see and I can testify that for our parish, thanks to Father Hazley, it is doing a human service in our community.
Amen.
But we are all in this together. Everybody's facing the same problems. And it is so useful sometimes for people to get together in groups and share experiences and learn from one another. Because we have the answers, or you might have the answer to my problem, and I might have the answer to your problem. The only way we would make something of that is if we share, because it's a community, it's a whole team effort to get this parenting thing right. Because if we don't get parenting right, we are doomed.
Yeah. But it comes back to that. Tristan said it. It takes a village to bring up a child.
Correct.
Yeah, it really does.
I think also is how do you view yourself within a community, whether it's in a home church or in a community. Because, for instance, us at Holy Cross, a great benefit for me is our men's group. We meet every Tuesday, different age groups. And just as I said, that is a moment for men to come not only to worship, but also to take that moment to just express yourself, and learn from each other. Because you have men who would have lost a spouse, they have adult children, young children. And for me, it is one of that space where that really, to help mentally, emotionally, recognize sometimes that what I am going through is extremely insignificant to what someone else may be going through. And in a very strange way, that helps soothes that moment, because now you're shifted from yourself to now recognize there's someone else who may need in greater assistance than yourself, And I think within each community space, I always say that you can have how many groups, you can form how much group you want in any group, any church or community. It comes back to the individuals in the community. Because I always say that you can build a system, but people run the system at the end of the day. And how do you see yourself? You see yourself as being a valuable part of that community. Because sometimes, again, probably experience it in Europe, where that you have events throughout the year, and it's the same people over and over and over.
Usual suspects.
That's right, So I always say, okay, just like, again, when I speak to my kids, that you can either be, if you look at it from you sports of analogy, you can either be a fan, a fanatic, a passive participant, or an active participant on the field of life. You have to make a decision. Don't go through life complaining. One of the things I always tell Father Hazy, just one of my personal, I don't like hearing people complaining about something. I just like solutions. Let's just say, what is the solution to it? That is my personal. Everyone is not the same. But I think that is just one of the things for me within whether it's the parish community, the wider community, or any homes. What is your role? And you have to take ownership of that. Because I think a lot of people either too afraid to take up a role, exercise that role, or open enough to seek the information that they need to fulfill that role. Because again, as you were saying, we have the young adults, the youths, different minds, different experiences, different age group. But it also means that we need a diverse group of adults, leaders now, to lead the flock at the end of the day. And for me, that is what is extremely important, because one is that I like with certain priests is that, it's like Father Hazley, I may be the priest, but there are people in charge of different ministries. I'm not micromanaging. And you have to understand that this is your responsibility, take charge of that. So for me, it comes back to how do you see yourself? What is your role in the community? And really contributing positively towards that.
I like that you take it from an individual standpoint in the terms of where am I, what role do I play? I remember I had a conversation with a guy. He was engaged in counsel with my wife and he and his spouse. And he was saying, when you look around, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to marriage and stuff like that. And I don't think marriage makes sense. And I'm like, really and truly, if that is the outlook you have on it, it wouldn't make sense for you. But if you change your way of thinking, you change your perspective, and you say, all right, let me look around my community. Are there married couples in my community? How are they surviving within the political climate? How are they making things work? And I told them, sometimes it's just selective attention. Because if you say, when you look around, you're only seeing divorced couples and separated couples, I say, well, I could take you to a church, I could show you a few married couples owned by me, And I mentioned the men's group in Holy Cross as well. And I said, for me, when I went to that men's group, I was the youngest one there, and by a lot. And for me, going to that men's group and having that interaction with these men and hearing their experiences of life, and how exciting it is to be married, and you go home to your wife and she give you a little trouble. Or you went on pilgrimage. No. No, but just hearing, you know, they say, boy, I couldn't tell her I went to meet her, tell her I went to pilgrimage. I just hearing those kind of stories, and you're like, wow, that sounds beautiful, you know. I want to be a part of that. I want to feel that, experience something like that. And it's just a matter of you putting yourself in those communities, putting yourself in those spaces to experience that kind of love, to share those stories. And I think that's really beautiful on what.
And I think that's where we have to try to develop in the church as well. You know, you talked about your son, and he belongs to the altar servers community as well. You know, I remember when Henry was at St. Patrick's, and a very small little altar community, but they got so close they got so close to him. In fact, one of them, he comes and he visits with his parents because and they've become like good friends. He's now uncle. He's changed from deacon to uncle, you know, and I think it's so important. And sadly, a lot of those communities are now being challenged because we don't have, the youth groups. People don't want to come out. They want us to be online. Can we meet online instead? And all kinds of, and I think that is disrupting. If we can somehow come back, and we have to look at it in a wider perspective. Sometimes parents don't want their children outside because of the dangers of society.
Correct,
It's dangerous for my child to walk home by herself 7 o'clock in the night, so I don't want it. And so I think these are some of the challenges that we are facing as a church as well. We want to have, I remember when I was young, the choir was Friday evening. Whether you could sing or you can't sing, the choir, because that's where you met the guys, and that's where we all talked after the choir. We sit down outside, and so late and whatever, you'd walk home after, and that built community there and built relationships, and so. But I think our young people now, I think that's one of the challenges we face. How do we find that space for them to learn to be around like-minded people as well?
As you mentioned, community, one of the things about community now is that usually that community is also on WhatsApp. It's a WhatsApp group. And I believe that we need training in how to communicate in a group on WhatsApp. Because very often people dump and people say things in a group on WhatsApp that they wouldn't say to each other face to face. And very often in community, because I see sometimes we have a neighborhood community, and sometimes some of the posts is really cringeworthy, and you have, I believe, somewhere along the line, the technology seems to be moving faster than our knowledge of the ethics and the manners on social media. You said how important social media is. And one has to be very careful. And I don't know, but probably even in the schools, we have to have some sort of online etiquette or online manners training. Some of the things I see, some things that you have on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, some of the ways they communicate on WhatsApp leave a lot to be desired, and they're not life-giving. They could, very often, some of those things can be toxic.
Definitely.
Toxic and also regressive, because one of the things pointed out to my daughter, Tiffany and Michael, when you send in me messages, I don't understand this short. I don't. And I will always tell them, this is one of the ways, if you want to stymie your ability to read, spell, understand, persist with this. And it's something I recognize they have cut down a bit from doing. Show them the articles, what the research would have said on it. Because retards, you're learning, you're spelling and everything. So again, just being open, I think is very important. We grew up in a time where you can't really question your parents. But it's something I allow them to do. Ask a question.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So as we look to wrap up, I just want to invite everyone, all the panelists, to look into the camera, and I want you to give one hope or one hope that you would like for parents within our society that are traversing this uncertain time, that traversing these these troubled waters.
Wow, you go first.
I think the hope for me is for parents to be connected with themselves, to understand themselves very well, to understand their value system. Because we cannot pass on to children a value system if we don't have a clear understanding what we believe in, what are our values as a parent, and to live those values, because very often it is the lived values that the children absorb. It's not the told values. So to understand, and I believe that despite all of AI, technology, stresses and strains, geopolitics, if the family is very clear on its value system and those values are lived within the home, I believe very often, and I've seen it in experience, that the children imbibe that and they are able better to cope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Well, I simply would like to ask parents, whether the society, whether our government say it or not, to please follow His Grace's request that our children stay away from AI and stay away from computers and so, well, not computers, they have to learn, but stay away from social media until they're at an older age.
Definitely. Thank you. Shirley?
I just have the hope that parents will realize that they are not alone. That we are here to support each other, and there are systems and mechanisms outside, support systems that they can seek out. Don't suffer in silence. Right. If you need assistance or help, there are avenues you can turn to, but we are not alone, and we have to work together. As you say, it takes a community, yes. And we will get there.
Thank you, Shirley.
Yes, Shirley took the rose right from my But what I would add is that we're not alone as parents, and although our faith doesn't eliminate fear, but is the foundation how to navigate troubled waters. And one of the things we have to remember is that we are not alone, but more importantly, that added to the support system, that God's grace is sufficient. And that while we have been called to be parents, we are also called to recognize that we are not in this alone, and that God is always with us. Mm-hmm. And in moments of troubled times, growing up, I always thought it was a cliche, but I've learned now at this stage in my life, it is not a cliche. Take your troubles to the Lord, Amen. And He would answer.
Thank you, Kevin. And well, I guess my sentiments, my words of hope would just be patient with yourself and trust in God. I know, well, within this contemporary society, once things start to go haywire, one thing start to go downhill, because we live in such a secular, individualistic, materialistic world, religion and faith is the first thing that goes out the window. Just be patient with yourself. You'll get there. Pace yourself and trust in God. So this has been Tristan Gullop alongside Deacon, Hillary, Sandy, Shirley, and Kevin within this segment of Calming Troubled Waters by the Samaritan Movement. We hope that you enjoyed, and we thank you so very much for tuning in. Take care. God bless.